building my own shipping container home. Join me on my journey from construction to completion of my mortgage-free home on a homestead. Well, welcome back to Think Outside the Container, guys. I know it's been a while since I posted an update. If you want to know why, just take a look behind me. And indeed, it's finally time to give you guys a good update. So let's start moving in here. Today's video is going to be the framing update. This is not an official episode in the episodes of Think Outside the Container. This is sort of a kind of quick impromptu update because I have left you guys in the dark for far too long. But this is the shipping container home, still a work in progress, but at this moment as I speak, framing, plumbing, and electrical is also complete. And that's what these videos are going to be for. These are going to be sort of quick, impromptu, not necessarily polished or perfectly edited like the main episodes are, but just to keep you guys a little posted. Here's the back of the house. We're going to go inside in just a second, and I'm going to give you a full tour of the container home framing. But I wanted to give you guys a quick exterior look. By the way, I already welded the containers to the foundation. Already welded them together. There's a little more of that action. A little more of that welding action. This is the south side where the container doors are. We're still finishing up that. And again, we come back to the front of the house. So let's go inside and let me show you guys the framing, shipping container home framing. As I've built the actual house, I've continued adding to and developing the 3D model. The model actually provides me incredible assistance as I can plan every aspect of the home in advance and figure out what parts and pieces work for framing, electrical, plumbing, etc. This includes the many decisions I had to make about framing, like how to frame the corners of a container home where the double top plate should overlap, but can't because of that big corner cube containers have. And other things like how to install windows in a container, which as you can see in the 3D model, there were multiple layers to the final system I ended up using. This new updated 3D model is available to download and explore right now. Just click the link in the description below to learn more. Now real quick before I show you the rest of the framing, now that this house build is kind of coming to a finish, I have more time to do other things, including providing 3D modeling services. So if you have a shipping container home design that you'd like to see brought to life in a 3D model, I am now offering services for 3D modeling in SketchUp. Feel free to check the email in the description and you can reach out to me. We can get into contact. And again, this is not considered a structurally sound designs. Any 3D modeling I offer would be purely for the aesthetic or visual looks, customized to whatever you're looking for, visually speaking. So again, one obvious feature here is the straight shot from front door, sliding glass, right across to the back. So when you come in, you are getting a clear straight shot out the back of the home and onto the rest of the rural property. But wow, where do you start with framing? Let me just give you guys a quick sort of just look around here, get you guys to see the stuff. Get you guys to look at it because there's a lot of detail that went into the framing. I had to do extensive, exhaustive research. I had to send a couple questions to the building department to make sure that they're okay with some of these things. You can see some of the plumbing and the electrical work, obviously. This is the end of the kitchen area. So we're going to do plumbing and electrical in a separate video. There's that. Whew, electrical is fun, I'll tell you. Electrical is fun. So now we're entering the main bedroom. So let's pull back for a second. This is the main bedroom. I'll tell you guys, framing was pretty fun. daunting, like basically everything else in this build has been. Because, you know, when you're doing something for the first time and when the stakes are pretty high, because, you know, it's a house, it's going to be your house, and a lot of expenses that go into this thing, and you don't want to screw anything up. Every step has been daunting, but in the end, you know, you just focus and you do things the right way and things come out okay. If you hear me, you got to be careful anyways. You got to double, triple check. I'm all about double, triple checking and then beginning the work. So more framing. See these joists here attached to joist hangers. You got your bottom plate. This is interesting here. This is a hold down. It was in the plans, probably not necessary when the containers outside are welded to the plates themselves. But, you know, an extra measure, I suppose. That literally goes down. This is I think it's called the Hdu Hold Down. This device has a bolt right there. It's nutted on, screwed into this corner post. And then that bolt there goes straight down through the floor of the shipping container. And it's embedded into the concrete column itself with an epoxy glue, adhesive, I guess you can call it. So we continue here. This is the sort of the closet slash bathroom entrance framing. Closet slash bathroom entrance framing. If you're wondering what those additional blockings are there, which stops right there, that's for the barn door attachment. It's going to be a barn door over the bathroom right there. So then we're going to have standard sort of pocket style, sliding style closet doors. But again, that was one of the bigger things I had to construct. That was one very large piece. Man, I was asleep. I was literally asleep and I just hear a truck outside wake me up. The lumber is here, folks. So that is the, so here now we enter the bathroom. As you can see, the toilet flange in place. We'll do plumbing in another episode. A lot of intricacies here. I'm going to get into a lot of that now. Had to add some plywood extension for the bathtub to fit properly in this confine. It was a little too big. Here you got your vent, and again, another corner, another Hdu hold down with the bolt right down to the corner of the concrete. You know, it's amazing. You look at stuff like this, and you see, like, you know, something. It's just like, oh, it's just a pipe and it's just a thing. The amount of detail that I had to go into, that I had to plan out, excruciating detail, so that all this was lined up and everything was in the right position. It's just a lot of work. You know, they say knowing is half the battle. It might be more than that. You know, it might be more than that. That's the stuff you don't see on camera. The endless hours of planning, researching, double, triple, quadruple checking, planning. Did I say planning yet? Planning things out. So let's sort of start in this corner and take a closer look at what really is happening here. So you've got this bottom plate. The bottom plate is butted up against the steel wall of the container, and it's sitting on top of the wood floor. This is the wood floor here. Now, there's a small section of metal here, but then wood continues on the other side. So obviously I didn't nail through the bottom plate into metal, but I did nail through the bottom plate into wood. It's secured there. You got a lot of detail, a lot of complexity happening here in the window area. Now, here you have a sort of, I believe it's a California corner taking place here. And it's simply a 2x4 here. And then this thing is kind of sideways on the bottom plate. And this 2x4 extends all the way to the back here. So the end of this 2x4 is flush with this 4x4 post here. And then it's sort of capped off at the end. We're all the way at the end, flush on the end. It's capped off with another 2x4 right here, another 2x4. And that's literally just flush capped onto the end of the 2x4. Again, we're at another corner of the house, so we see another one of the hold downs. So here, again, it goes up. Now, here's the interesting part here. So at the corner of the shipping container, like if you look on the outside of a shipping container, you're going to see these big, like, cubes, these big cube blocks on every corner. There's one, you can see it protruding from the inside right there. And there's one over there as well. You can see that block protruding. On the inside, that kind of posed some issues because the top plates, as you can see, there's the 1 plate and the 2 plate for the double top plate. As it runs across, temporarily interrupted by the header of the window, it comes here. It doesn't have a chance to overlap with the double top plate on the adjacent wall. Normally, double top plates overlap and secure onto each other. Well, I couldn't do that here because that block literally is in the way of the corner. Now, I had to look extensively. Again, I had to extensively research, trying to see what other people did, other professionals did. You got the one guy out in California who built he's a professional dude. He does this stuff for a living. He built a shipping container home. And from what I can tell, this is kind of basically what he did. And it's what I've seen others do. Now, the thing is that the double top plates, according to my structural plans, which again, if you're interested, the link to download them is in the description below. The structural plans had these A35 clips, I believe they're called, and they actually attached the top plate directly into the top rail of the shipping container. The shipping containers have these tube steel rails that run along. You can kind of see it there. You can see that right there. That's the tube steel right there. It's that big square that's sticking out the top there. And that tube runs the length of the shipping container. Runs the length of the shipping container all the way down. And that's an important structural member. And so the double top plate is actually attached with screws to the double top plate and to the container top rail. So that's its own thing. So any potential structural uncertainty that might exist because you couldn't overlap the double top plates, I would say is probably, again, this is my amateur opinion, is probably substituted by the fact that the framing walls themselves, all the exterior framing walls, are literally latched onto the top rail of the container. It is not going anywhere. So that was an interesting detail. Here's another fascinating detail that is like, this was a major undertaking. And it wasn't even that hard to execute, but again, it's that daunting feeling when you're doing something you've never done before, and you just feel that sense of dread. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people probably feel that in many different parts of your life. Even if you're going to go for like your first job interview or something, or your job interview for a new job, your first, job interview for a new job, you can feel nervous because it's almost like you're treading into uncharted territory. And it's almost like, it almost seems like it's a built-in fact of life. Like when you're doing something you've never done before, that takes willpower to even take the first step to even go that direction. You get this feeling of like butterflies in your stomach, complete uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen. That just seems to be a thing that happens. And of course, I've basically had butterflies in my stomach for the last 2 years. This whole thing started in April 2019 is when I began. The idea popped in my head. And it was about a year of planning, buying the land, looking for land, buying the land, getting everything ready before I actually started construction. So I've been actually in the building process for about a year. So this was a hell of a one. And what are you looking at here? Well, here's the thing. If you look at the 3D model or if you look at the structural plans, you'll see that there is it's a 24-foot long span from the entrance of the home to the exit is a 24-foot long span. So that means that these rafters would have had to have spanned 24 feet. There's an issue with that. Generally speaking, the longer a rafter has to span, again, this is super general, I'm an amateur, don't take my word for it. The longer a rafter has to span, the taller the rafter has to be. These are 2x8s, I believe. Pretty sure they're 2x8s. The taller they have to be. And the thing is that the taller these rafters get, the lower it makes my ceiling. And I didn't want to have a low ceiling. I bet I could have had a 7-foot tall ceiling and I wouldn't have had to create this break in the span. That's what this is. So because it was so long, we had to create a break in the span to keep these rafters at 2x8. And again, notice that they're double 2x8. This is what the engineer told me. I don't know if it's overkill, but he said double the joists, double the rafters, whatever they're called specifically, double them up. So that's, that was an extra cost, especially with the price of lumber as we saw it. But again, so we had to break the span. So what did we do? Me and my engineer sort of came up with this idea. We would take an I-beam, and I had actually sent him a picture of this online, and he's like, well, actually, we can do that. We can totally do that. This is an I-beam here. As you can see, it's an I-beam. Again, all these details are in the 3D model. They're also inside of the structural plans. With the link to download is in the description below. So this is an I-beam, but it's an I-beam that's packed with wood. It's packed with wood. And it's bolted. It took me many days to fully flesh out because the structural engineer just kind of put like a basic spec. If you look in the 3D model, you'll see far more detail on how this is constructed. There's a 2x4, and then there's some additional plywood to help get the right depth in packing that. Because the wood, as you can see, the wood that's in the I-beam kind of had to be fairly flush with the edge of the beam itself. So the face of the wood is pretty flush with the edges of the I-beam. And that's because the joist hangers had to go onto that wood. So I didn't want the wood inside of this I-beam. I didn't want that wood to be inside of the beam, inside of the flanges of the I-beam, too much so that this joist hanger would hit the I-beam but wouldn't be touching the wood. So essentially, this I-beam was delivered, and then there was the process of welding this thing. So it's a small piece of steel. It's a small piece of steel on the bottom, like a little plate. That plate is welded onto the steel of the edges of the shipping container. So if you look again, this is actually the point. You see that track there? That's where two shipping containers meet. So the point where the two shipping containers meet is steel. This is wood on either side, but then this is steel. So it's actually a good spot to weld onto. So the little plate on the bottom here was welded to the steel of the shipping containers. And then this, I believe 3x3 by 1/8 inch thick tube steel is welded to the plate itself, all around welded. And then of course that rises up and then is welded to another little plate on top, and then that plate is welded onto the I-beam. And then the beam runs. The rafters attach like normal. As you can see, we have these bolts coming through every other space. On one side, you see the threaded part sticking out. So it's a washer, a nut. The bolt goes through. On this side is the end of the screw and a washer. That goes through and it secures it in place, not going anywhere. And you know, I'm pretty happy with it. It's been complete for almost 3 months now, I think. 2.5, 3 months. And it's rigid as hell and it's looking good. So I think it's going to be fine. But again, that's why everybody has to get their own structural guy. Every situation is unique. So you just have to be careful. You have to really make sure that everything works for you. And that's a big part of the reason why these building departments exist. That's why they're going to make you get your own structural engineer. That's why they're going to make you get your own PE stamp on your plans. Somebody who went over it, revised the plans, made sure everything was fine, structurally sound. And you won't even be allowed to build unless you get that. Assuming you're in an area where there's a building department that's going to make you. I mean, you can go, if you want to go really live out in the middle of nowhere, some places there are no building codes and you can just do whatever you want. So, again, now here's some of the framing for the door. Now this was another epic undertaking, especially for somebody like me with no prior experience. Epic undertaking. And what we have here is, we have, it's fairly traditional. If you look over here, you've got literally 1, 2, 3, 4 2x4s. And you know, it probably didn't need to be that many, but so this here, this first 2x4 is supporting the header piece that runs basically the full length, which then in a sense continues upward, provides a little more cripple support there. But then you've got these 2x4s, the next two, these run straight up, and there's actually a post cap right there. There's a post cap, and that actually connects on the sides of the two 2x4s. And then it kind of flips its orientation and then connects into this massive engineered laminated veneer lumber header. It's just so heavy and it's so huge. It came in one piece. Well, actually, no, yeah, it did come in one piece, but we had to cut it short. And this thing is just huge. And it's, again, this header is also latched with the 835 latch. The top of the header is latched to the top rail of the container as well. So again, rigid as hell, not going anywhere. And then last but not least, you have the final of the 2x4s. Final of the 2x4s runs up and simply provides the support for the continuation of the double top plate. And we continue here, and it's of course mirrored on this side. It's duplicated over here. You got the same sort of thing. 4 2x4s run straight up. You got your cripples in between, and here was the bare minimum. If you look at it, it's 2 2x4s in between the 2 sliding doors. 2 2x4s. And there's a small little bottom plate section there. And that runs up, and of course is providing the support here where this break happens, and it continues on. Now, the reason I did this was because this is kind of an unconventional install. I mean, I don't think it's every day that somebody buys 2 separate sliding glass doors and puts them right next to each other side by side. I think that's a little unconventional. The reason that this was spaced this way, well, really, conventionally, when you're installing a door, you are screwing through the jamb of the door, screwing through the jamb of the door, and you're going right into the 2x4 that frames it. So the screw is actually going through the jamb and then into the 2x4. Well, is it possible that maybe I could have just put 1 2x4? Maybe, but I just felt like the bare minimum would be, the bare minimum would have been to put 2 2x4s, as if these 2 doors were their own independent doors, and as is standard framing, whenever you have a door, you have that framing of wood on either side all around. So you can think of it as the framing that encapsulates the door. That has its own, and then the next one, that framing is for this door that encapsulates that one. That was sort of part of the idea. I wanted to minimize the gap as much as possible, right? You know, if I could have made no gap there between the 2 doors, because if you look on the outside, I just stick this out here, you can get a sense that there is there's this gap here between the 2 doors. And I think aesthetically it doesn't look as good as if maybe there was no gap, but there it is. And you know, it doesn't look bad. I don't think it looks bad. I think it's just fine enough. It's just narrow enough. Interestingly enough, it was wider on the back here. So the back doors are actually, these are about 10 foot wide sliding doors when you put both of them together, 5 feet each, 10 in total. But these are 6 feet each, 12 in total. And the reason that I had to make the front bigger than the back, or rather the reason I had to make the back smaller, was because it was just good. It'll eventually conflict with the front wall of this small room here. This is probably going to be an office. This will be a really nice sized office. You know, put like a desk here. Look outside. And then, I don't know, this will serve really well as a baby / small kids room, if I ever come to that phase in my life. So the gap here between these, and this is actually a good opportunity to show you. Let me step back for a second. If you look at the gap here, it's definitely, as you clearly see, it's a bigger gap. I mean, in fact, we've got our usual, a 2x4 for this door and a 2x4 for this door, but you can see that there's a gap between the 2 2x4s. And you may be wondering, well, why'd you put a gap between these 2, but you didn't put a gap between those 2? Well, this again goes into the never-ending complexity of this this stuff. You got to do a lot of research and planning. Again, this is the stuff that you guys don't see because it's just me on the computer like Googling. You know, nobody wants to see that. If you actually look closely, you can actually see the two pieces of angle iron on either side that is part of the reinforcing system for the doors, for the cutting out of the holes in the shipping container where the doors are inserted into. This is a common thing with shipping container homes, and you can clearly see it from the outside. You can clearly see from the outside these pieces of angle iron here. These pieces of angle iron, it's part of the reinforcement. It sticks out of the house that way, but then it comes into the house this way. And this is what you have. Again, if you click the link in the description below, you download the 3D model, you'll actually be able to look in much more detail on how this is all constructed. The more advanced details on how it's all put together, how I did it. And so that's the reason for the gap here. It was causing a bit of an issue. If I remember correctly, the gap between these two doors is simply a consequence of how and where the angle irons were going to fall. You see, there's just enough of a gap between these two angle irons. And if I had put these two doors any closer together, if I had essentially eliminated this gap and brought them closer together, you'd see that the small gap would have to come in inches. And these two pieces of angle iron would basically collide into each other. And so I was kind of forced by a number of variables to plan it that way. But in the end, it all turned out flawless. So yeah, I'm trying to think of any other interesting details that I could show you guys. Oh, this is an interesting one. So over here, you have a deal where you've got the ends of each container. So this is the end of the container, 8 feet wide, stops here. As you can see, there's the delineation track. So the problem is that normally when people cut the walls out, this used to be a wall. As you can still see the corrugated marks where the corrugated wall of the containers used to be. Obviously, I cut this whole wall out to open the floor space. I mean, none of this would even be here if I haven't cut the walls out, right? And you can still see that the wall is still intact right here. The steel wall, the corrugated wall, the cut mark ends here. You can still see cut, keep. You don't want to cut the wrong wall out. You can still see that, but the wall continues, and then the wall stops here at the edge of this wall. So with that cut out, the problem is that usually whenever I've seen people cut walls out of a shipping container, they always stop right here. Because I think that this right here, this piece marks this is the boundary between just the corrugated wall and the actual overall structure of the corner post. If you look at a shipping container from the outside, they have these big corner posts that are actually attached to that cube I was talking about earlier. And that's an integral part of the structure as far as I understand. So I had to stop here, which meant I couldn't just continue this bottom plate all the way straight across to the other side of the house, because the bottom plate was being interrupted by this piece of steel here that is like that piece of steel. So with the bottom plate being interrupted, I had to then kind of make a L shape to come out a little bit, stop basically flush with the steel, and then the wall basically continues over here. The wall continues over here and does another like L-shaped thing, goes back, and then this is the bottom plate that continues. A lot of crud in the way. I'll show you over here. Again, it's sort of just repeated and mirrored. So you've got the bottom plate, that runs, stops, then has to come out a little bit like a L shape, stops, comes out enough so that it either is flush perfectly with where the cutout ends, or at least a little bit more. Because what then happens here is, as you can see, it stops. This came out on this side, and then it L-shapes back and then connects to the bottom plate. What's going to happen here is that from here to here, it's just going to be drywall. You're going to have, well, whatever, the other board that has to go there, and then also the drywall. So the drywall will simply span from here to here, and will perfectly just cover that up, and you won't even see it. Another detail that had to be sorted out and figured out by me in endless, exhaustive planning and research. So, window framing was interesting, for sure. Window framing was very interesting. Pretty much the same idea as framing around a door. To a degree, there's obviously many differences. And again, if you look at the 3D model, you can download it in the description below. You can see more detail on how the window goes into the opening that's cut out, and how the angle iron reinforces it, and all that good stuff. I made a mistake though, because when I ordered these windows, I forgot to account for where the screw, the jamb for the screws that go through land. And based on somebody else's design, I was under the impression that the screws should actually land outside of the container and would actually go, the screws would actually go through the angle iron that's out here. Would actually go through the angle iron. This is it here, the angle iron. And they would go through the angle iron that sticks out of the shipping container. But I failed to account for that, and so they actually landed inside the container. So there wasn't the steel angle iron for the screws to go through. There wasn't the steel angle iron on the outside for these. So these screws would just go into thin air, or maybe into this wood here. And that's what these little tabs are. These little tabs was like a makeshift thing I had to do after the fact. They're basically angle iron, and they're welded into, it's hard to see. I think you can see down here maybe a little better. Yeah, there you go. You can kind of see a little better there. So this is the angle iron right here that was part of the normal reinforcement. And then I had to weld these small little L-shaped pieces of steel. And as you can see, it kind of it's flat here and welded against this, but then this section comes up and then forms an L shape and then comes up this way. So it comes up like that and then comes this way out. And then that, as you can see here, that then created a piece of steel that could then, the screw through the jamb, it's kind of dirty, it's got like metal filing, you gotta clean it all out. The screw then goes through the jamb of the window and then it's literally embedded into this L shape that sticks out. So that was sort of a major, that was a big like hassle. And the thing is, like, there's a lot more to work than just the physical execution. There's a whole lot more to it. So it's important to be patient, to plan. So I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna show you guys this here. this was an interesting one because remember how earlier I was telling you about how where you get to the end of where the container is, you got this leftover piece of steel that's part of the corner post, right? Well, again, we have a bottom plate that runs here. This is a 2x6 because it's a plumbing wall. You've got your bottom plate running here. I still got to fix this. Just got to perfectly adjust that and then nail it in. It was we actually had to do like a retrofit type of deal because long story. But as you can see in there, the steel that is part of the corner post, we had to make a little notch out so that these plumbing lines could run through. Because earlier, just like how the bottom plate was interrupted by that steel of the corner post, the plumbing would be interrupted. So I had to make a notch out. That was part of what I had to have done, part of the planning of how this would have to actually end up working. So it continues through, and so that was kind of a circus, right? And again, if you actually look here in the bathroom, we have another one of those I-beam things. We have another one of those I-beam structures here in the bathroom. Because again, this is the only other part in the house, aside from the one I showed you earlier, where there is actually another 24-foot long span. Anytime it was over the 16-foot span, in fact, here's a good example. So you can see rafters running, it's running, and it stops. It stops at 16 feet. But over here in the bathroom, we have it continues on. So we have another situation where it's a 24-foot long span, and we needed something there to attach these 16-foot long rafters to and create a break. And so that's exactly what this is. So, as if one wasn't enough, I had to make another one of those fucking things. A lot of planning and a lot of work execution. So, that's essentially the gist of container home framing. For the most part, it is basically like framing a normal house. For the most part, it's basically like framing a normal house. You know, there's nuances here again, like, you know, what do you do here when you got to make a workaround, okay? What do you do with those corner cubes that disallow the double top plates from overlapping onto each other? But that's the essence of it. And I think it took me I had the majority of the framing was done in a month. I just worked nonstop. It's just nonstop. My dad would come up like once a week if he wasn't like on vacation or, you know, doing other stuff. He would come up and help. And then, of course, he definitely helped me a lot when it was time to put these rafters up. Because I tell you, putting these rafters up felt like almost as much work as framing the entire house itself. Like the walls. Just putting these rafters up. One thing I didn't account for, and I guess my structural engineer didn't account for, was that the rafters at a 2x8 size, 2x8, they actually have trouble fitting into the joist hanger, considering where the roof of the container is. You know, that corrugated roof of the container is not too much higher. It's maybe 3 inches above the top of these rafters. And so based on where the joist hanger has to be positioned, right there, when you try to lift the 2x8 up and to put it inside of that joist hanger, it would actually be hitting the roof and it wouldn't fit. So it required a different approach where we actually had to take the joist hanger and only install 1/2 of it and then leave this side kind of loose. And so it was still kind of malleable, so we can still kind of flex the hanger, that metal hanger over, and it would give us the space we needed to come in. So it kind of complicated the install. But it's also the fact that you're dealing with two 2x8s high up in the air. That's basically the end of this framing tour, shipping container home framing tour. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I know it's been a while since I posted, but like I told you months ago, I've been going nonstop since January. I've really technically been going nonstop since April 2019 when this whole thing started, but I've been really going nonstop since January of 2021. It's just never ending. Wow. But hey, at the end of the day, it has been fun and it has been rewarding. And there is definitely a sense of pride in all the work that I put in to build this thing. It's not something that just comes, you can't, just snap your fingers and suddenly you've got a thing that's going to last you a lifetime. That's part of the thing. When you're spending 2 years and you're spending a lot of money on a shipping container home or any type of home and you're building it yourself and you're sitting there like, oh my God, this is so much work in 2 years. Because this thing's almost done now. One of the things I realized I had to tell myself is, look, this is something that's going to last a lifetime, if not more. That's why there's so much work that goes into this, because you're not just like getting a couple of palm trees and a couple scrap pieces of fallen tree trunk and putting it together in an afternoon and this is my house, and then it gets blown away the next time a storm comes through. You're building something that's supposed to withstand everything. Even here in Florida, this thing's supposed to withstand hurricanes. You're building something that has all these modern conveniences like running water, pressurized running water, drainage systems with venting. We'll get into all that later. Electrical, so you can just plug in all the modern marvels of man's inventions and improve your life. Venting for the microwave, and that's why it takes so long. That's why so much work goes into it, because you're building something that provides incredible long-term convenience to your life and also is something that's supposed to last for an extremely long time. And you don't just do something that lasts for 100 years or more. You don't just do that by snapping your fingers. So again, I want to say thanks to everybody for watching. The next video will be a quick plumbing video, plumbing in a shipping container home. And then I'm going to be doing one on electrical. And then that'll probably be the most updates I'll be posting for now until the house is just done. And then I can go ahead and go back to the last episode that I finished and continue the episodes properly from there. So again, if you're interested in downloading the 3D model, now updated with exquisite detail, I've been developing the model as I've continued building and planning for this house. In more exquisite detail, you can get that 3D model. Just click the link in the description below. You can download it. Additionally, the structural plans that my engineer created for this house are also available to download. Just click the link in the description below. And yeah, so that's it. Thanks for watching. It's hot today, I tell you. It's very humid out there. All right, later.